everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is Out. Off-grid living in the 21st century. And just talking a little bit about decentralization, the technologies that will take us essentially from the 21st century to the 22nd century, and how, how this really plays into the greater, social and political and geopolitical context that we're facing as a world. And, a good time to talk about it because, well, the power's out at our house. It's another one of their planned safety power shutoffs, the PSPS. Just a couple weeks ago, it's like it shut off automatically because the grid was overloaded. That was a different kind of power shutoff. This is the other kind of power shutoff that we have here in what would be the fifth largest economy in the world and supposedly the most developed, state in the union. But it's just really funny because, again, people, they set these goals, they set these ideologies, and they it's almost like the ideology becomes primary rather than reality, which is very interesting because, it's like, I forget who it said, facts are inconvenient things, it's just it's hard when your whole reality is turning against you and proving that the things that you've thought are wrong. And, it's that cognitive dissonance where you can either acknowledge that you believed something wrong, that you understood something incorrectly, and kind of have that reckoning and that humility and, change your path and learn more and open your mind a little bit to alternative narratives in that particular context. Or you can just sweep it under the rug and, go running back to the media and basically just, have that script, reloaded, right? And that's what, the brainwashing that they're calling, because the actual synaptic functions and sequences that normally occur with cognition and thought just basically get hijacked. And when the brain is put into alpha wave, it's basically in a hypnotic trance state. And it's basically takes suggestions as commands, and your guard is down. You don't have your guard up. Where if you were just talking to somebody, or doing something here in this real world, it would activate your brain much more than when you're just staring at a screen. So it's totally different. And that's why, what I like about YouTube is the interactivity. It's like, it would be cool if I could talk to Tucker Carlson, basically after the show and whatnot. But that's what's cool about, these platforms. I don't want to give even too much credit to YouTube at this point because they're basically killing their own creation. And, basically turning the goose who lays into the golden eggs into, basically a goose omelet, because it's more important to them at this point for the social control than the profits. The people who think that capitalism is the problem and that all of these billionaires and tech magnates are doing what they're doing because they just love profits so much, like, it really flies in the face of the entire evidence. It's very much more important to them to have their social control than it is to have nominal trappings of wealth, right? They create the money, right? All of the money is just a relative position of resources and power and authority and capital in a sort of, just real sense in this physical world. And, so they can, it's, again, I don't care who makes the laws as long as you give me control over the currency, as, Mayor Amschel Rothschild, once said. And, back then it was Mayor Amschel, and now it's Linda Rothschild, who, is best friends with Hillary Clinton and, basically the modern kind of acting agent of, the Rothschild banking cartel. And it's very obvious what their plan is at this point. I'm going to allude to some things that I'll do in a different video, but we'll just talk about kind of the technology aspect right now. Because what they want to do is take AI and make an entirely connected world that has no really dividing lines other than the districts that they set within that structure. And that is, AI will come to the forefront regardless of the context. But there's two very different worlds that we're facing. A world where everyone gets unified and dominated by this technocratic elite who are in command of essentially the AI. And basically the alternative to that is a decentralized world that has an objective structure, an objective legal system, an objective information recording, basically ledger for world events and activity and commerce and transactions. The blockchain presents this, but the blockchain, like any other tool, can be used for good or ill. It can be used to liberate people from the systems of centralized control, or it can be used as a tool of centralized control. And what happens is going to result from what we choose to make happen. If we continue to let these people, who we're falsely calling the elite, but are truly just the institutionalized parasite class, then their dystopian AI future, the 80s sci-fi movie dystopian future will come to pass. But the problem they've been having, and this is again my optimistic thesis, is that the more that people wake up to that, the more that they have the ability to influence the timeline and to change the course of events and to call attention to the crimes that are being committed. And so that really changes the tactical outcome, especially when it's not one person or two people or three people or 10 people. It's literally millions and millions of people. And at a certain point, there is a critical threshold. There is the 100th monkey syndrome, right? At a certain point, once enough people in the species learn something, it almost becomes just endemic common knowledge that people know almost as an instinct. And that is very much, again, a function of our connection to our environment. I really doubt that a person who is completely ensconced within EMF, electromagnetic soup inside these cities and big apartment buildings, it basically it makes sense that would interfere with the natural instinct process, the common knowledge that we are all picking up, and the wisdom of God that is coming back to this planet as we start to arc out of the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age. Different opinions on that, but I believe we're at the bottom and heading up. It's still a long way until the Golden Age again. But I think with the nature of time compression, it won't be thousands of years. It will be a matter of decades. And that is because we are acting in alignment with that greater field. And right now we are a small group, but the truth magnifies, right? The seed that takes root and becomes a sprout and a sapling, the more that it gains in that momentum, the heart, it's like everything builds. Everything is cumulative. Not everything is just this digital iteration that has no meaning or relevance to the prior one being recorded and analyzed in some great hive mind, machine brain. There's a whole worship, right? The atheist technocratic elite, in fact, they're worshiping a demonic god which they're trying to resurrect through artificial intelligence. And there's been numerous movies within the last 10 or so years to really drive home that fact. What was the one with Johnny Depp, and he basically becomes the AI and stuff. There's a lot of movies. I don't really even watch movies anymore, but even the ones that I've seen, it's been a very prominent theme. And what we're playing really geopolitically right now is this, whether we move towards a global state with AI and basically working with the the technocratic parasite class of China and the PRC, the Communist Party, and that them merging with essentially the parasite class of the West. Think Soros, and Joe Biden is the perfect representative agent of those people, of someone who just basically is pure grift and will sell out this country at the highest level without even a second thought. And that is why, the whole scandal with Hunter Biden existed, and multiple scandals. And it's, why they basically went nuclear with impeachment when they even saw that Trump was trying to allude to it in a freaking phone call with the president of Ukraine, who is also hip to the crimes. And eventually, it's all going to come out even more than it already has. But the question is whether or not we resonate and amplify that message. Because if we're not actually participating in driving this home, again, the whole thing is a moot point. If you're still just an observer and you're not taking fundamental productive action in your own life to build that sovereignty and to build that world and to ensure that optimistic outcome, then basically, I can understand why you'd just be black-pilled and depressed. It is very much my optimism is a product of my activity and my action. And if I wasn't doing that, then yes, I would be depressed. I would be very morose about situations in general, as I was for many years of my life, until I changed my fundamental attitude towards that and the nature of action, right? The crux of that psychic force that you have to act. Even if you make mistakes, you have to keep going. You have to just learn from it and pick it up and keep going, because that is how the human brain works. Nothing goes right the first time for the AI or for the human. We are beings who experience this world, and that is how we know where the walls are and where the limits are and what can be changed and what can't be changed, is through that experience and that trial and error. And so basically we have built a civilization that is very much assuming of several underpinning things, with regard to science and philosophy and morality and a number of different things, biology. And we've built this giant centralized world. They're trying to take it that much further, again, why all that stuff is relevant, because they want to take it to the zenith. They want to centralize and control everything. But it really, when you centralize and control everything, you create a single point of failure for the entire system. And that is again, how the Death Star blows up from a tiny little exhaust port, is that there's always a fundamental weakness to any point. And so the fewer points that you have for failure, the greater the likelihood is that catastrophic collapse will occur. So what is the answer to this? The answer is decentralization. The answer is a network. The answer is basically interconnectivity of independent entities, of nodes within the network. And so when a single, again, all of those points will have their own weaknesses, but when one gets compromised, it has an exponentially a smaller and more mild effect on the total system. And there isn't that collapse. There's just a minor reduction that then gets basically totally absorbed by the remaining points. And so this is really how we have to think of the society that we're building. And again, even on just a purely technical hardware aspect, the more that we can build this sovereignty and get off-grid and return to our connection with basic human resources, the food, the water, the air, the power, even just the energy, right? We have to take command at that, because if we're assuming that society will always provide these things for us and, it's all going to be fine, and we just need to take this narrow set of political action but not forsake, the wider industrial, centralized program, it's not going to really work out. We have to go off on our own. This has to be the pioneer spirit of America is what will save it and what will be a major part of the spiritual revolution and its success. Because again, they tried to control us in the old country, but we came out here to the new world and we created a society built on that recognition of independent, sovereign actors, and of people who are endowed with, qualities and powers from their creator. And that basically, in the agricultural ethos of that connection with the land really is the fulfillment of the will of God, and, the plan that this world has, and that the creator made for it and for us. It is very exciting. We get to take a part in that once we wake up and construct the kingdom of heaven and start laying the bricks and setting the foundation, and then eventually our children will build the walls, and our grandchildren will build higher walls, and they'll build supporting structures, and the trestles will go up. And I believe that in my lifetime, by the time I pass from this particular mortal coil and incarnate once again, then I will see basically the creation of this world. And that, my friend, is when I will allow myself to expire. But in any case, so basically, the power's out here, but nevertheless, because we go camping, so I have a camp stove. It's a nicer one. I think it's called Camp Chef. It's on Amazon, but it's a really good one, good gas flow. And I've got basically, what is it? I think like a 10-gallon, one of the smaller, like half-size propane tanks, and a milk crate, and a little adapter so that it can connect to the stove. Just like that. Normally with those little green Coleman gas tanks, they've got a different fit than like a normal size propane tank. And so basically you just need a little adapter, a flow regulator. But those green Colemans, if you're still using those, just get away from those, man. Like, get just a small propane tank and an adapter. The amount of waste, in those little green Coleman things, there's I think somewhere in the realms of 80 to 100 million of those, basically discarded every year. So, again, it's like I might be right-wing, I guess, at this point in history, but I absolutely am an environmentalist. A conservative wants to conserve what is valuable, right, in the physical and the metaphysical senses. It is, not against anything that I'm aware of as far as the conservative position, the right-wing position, I guess, that would suggest that we just need to waste resources, right? In fact, that's more of almost just a thing of Marxism, is they basically use all of the resources because there's no countervailing pressures and limiting factors on their power, and then they make a whole bunch of plans, they make a whole bunch of actions based on those plans, and then the plans don't pan out, and then you got a bunch of ghost cities, and you got a bunch of wasted excess capacity, and you got a bunch of billions of tons of food thrown away. There's very much something to be said, whether you're a Marxist or a capitalist, about the efficient distribution of resources and how do we ensure that takes place. And basically we're still in the early innings of this whole global human civilization, trip to the stars type phase, where we become a type 1 civilization, as they say. And we colonize the inner solar system and the moons of Saturn and Jupiter. All of these things will take place, but first we've got to actually gain control over ourselves and thus our, civilization on this planet. And once it's a coherent field rather than an incoherent field, that same amount of people, it'll be a different amount, but, ultimately there's no massive, skyrocketing population boom that's going to happen. It's already leveling off, and, it'll probably top out at around 11 or 12 billion. And the irony is that people will have much more space and freedom and autonomy than they do now. It's just that people get so, again, acclimated to their own conditions. The people who live in cities think that, there's no space on the planet because look how crowded we are. It's like you're living in a giant pile, and then you complain and say, oh, yeah, see, the world doesn't have enough space. Like, you put yourself in that pile. You understand? You can leave that pile. There's lots of space out there. And right now, all 7 billion could live with a land of their own, somewhere of at least a quarter acre, and it would take up no more than the state of Texas, which is a large space. But again, Texas is a very small compared to the entire planet and the entire landmass. And once we get into things like airships, right, combine the idea of an RV with an airship, and you can have decentralized communities of living anywhere, in the water, on land, at the top of a mountain, in the sky even. You could have sky communities. You could create a modular system that was interconnecting, and so that people could literally hook up their craft and create kind of larger craft, like almost Lego pieces. And then, basically there would be different models and makes and whatnot, but ultimately it would be a modular structure, and everybody could kind of agree on the interconnected ports and the fittings and whatnot, just as we have, standardized screws and standardized charging ports for electric cars. We can apply that same ethos, and so it can be this whole, mutual development, 3D printing of parts. Once we combine that with things like hemp bioplastic, we can make them stronger and lighter than steel and print the whole of the craft using a warehouse-sized 3D printer. And so this is really, the future, again, just as people in 1920 prognosticating about the future of the 20th century, they had extremely limited information. And most of them, hardly anybody was involved in what, only a few were involved in. Men like, Nikola Tesla were involved in creating that new world. And how did they create it? Again, through alignment with the objective structure of the universe, recognition of those laws, and then abiding by them, and thus gaining more power within the universe and command over its elements. Right? Very simple, and why this is the focus of all people on the highest vibration. Is not on, people or events or, cars and whatnot. It's on the absolute fountain of creation. And, basically the bringing of divinity into this world to create that golden age. And so a big part of that golden age is having the ability to give to others and not lose from ourselves, not to be sacrificial, but to be symbiotic. And so when everybody has their own off-grid energy production and storage, again, the mayor of LA was threatening to turn off power to people who were against the COVID lockdowns or whatnot, who were not abiding by it and having gatherings. They are now literally threatening, basically crimes, against humanity for people not obeying their completely, facetious scam hoax pandemic, right? That is now proving to be less deadly than the flu, not even more deadly than the flu. And luckily, it's having a backfiring effect. People are waking up not just to the COVID vaccine, but to the entire vaccine regime. And, there's many good things. Again, being off-grid, a big part of that is knowing how to heal yourself. Being able to make your own colloidal silver. Being able to, grow the healing herbs in your backyard. And to basically, make those tinctures yourself, to make those, botanical substances and concentrate them for their purposes in the body. And, it's not like everybody has to have everything in their own house, but when you can create that modular structure, there can be just a community processor. And so everybody can grow things on their little plot of land, but there will be like a community processor and maybe more of a regional kind of mass, transformation and production facility. But ultimately it can all be completely, networked. It can be decentralized. It can be totally symbiotic. It can be, effectively carbon neutral. Not that matters at all, but what matters is that we are producing the carbon. We are harvesting the carbon. And, because that's the ultimate, sort of limited resource. And if we can use agriculture instead of mining, right, you're actually not, carbon is renewable, but it's the minerals that are not renewable, obviously. You can only mine a metal once, right? And there is ultimately a limited there. But we don't need steel massively for all these structures. We don't need all of those systems. We can design new systems, and we can provide for our fellow man, and we can live the way we want to live without fear of political interference. And that all comes down to how we treat, responsibility. Basically it's more than camping. It's about building that world and being able to exist and survive and thrive in any situation. And so that's what I'd like everybody to meditate on as, out here in California, we can't even keep the power on. So much love to you guys. I'll see you next time. Peace.